Hey there! Did you know that the navigation bar is one of the most important parts of any website? And since so many people use their phones to browse the web, it's super important to make it responsive. That means it works perfectly on any screen size, big or small. This is Raman, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a simple and fully responsive navigation bar using HTML, CSS, and a tiny bit of JavaScript. All right, let's start by taking a look at what we'll be building today. As you can see, our navigation bar will adapt based on the size of the device. On smaller screens, like phones, most of the links will be hidden, and instead, we'll display a menu button. When clicked, this button will open a sidebar with all previously hidden elements. Navbar and sidebar are two separate elements, so you can customize them to fit your website's style perfectly. Sounds good? Then, let's dive into the code and make it happen. When we opened out project, let's start by creating files such as style.css, script.js, and index.html. Additionally, I'll add the background image I prepared earlier to the project directory. If you'd like to use the same background image, you can find the link in the video description. Now, inside our index file, let's create the basic HTML structure. Inside the head tag, we need to link our style sheet and a JavaScript file. To create the navbar, we will start with a nav containing an unordered list. Our navigation links are listed as li elements. I will use a temporary placeholder for the href attribute. You would have to enter a URL to the different HTML pages. Now, let's copy this several times and enter some example content like pricing, products, download, about, and dashboard. To preview changes in real time, I opened the website in a browser using the VS Code Live Server extension. Our page now looks rather simple, just an unordered list where every link is linked as a bullet point. So let's take care of our CSS design. We will start by removing any default margin and padding that the browser applies. Also, let's set body height to 100, device viewport height, to ensure that our body covers the whole available space on the device. That is something that I recommend doing every time that you start a new project. Before we set the background image, let's set the background color to something dark. That way, before the image loads on the page, we won't get flashed. Now we can set the background image, background size to cover, background repeat to no repeat, and background position to center. That way, the image will be centered and cover the whole screen without any damage. Moving on, let's set the font family to Open Sans. After all of this, we can finally start tweaking our navigation bar. We will start by setting width to 100%, background color to something dark but slightly transparent so the image behind remains visible, and border bottom to give more depth. Now for the unordered list, let's set the list style to none and display to flex. We can now set the height of the navigation links to 64 pixels. And since the first element is our logo, then let's move everything else to the right side using margin right auto. Now let's style the anchor tags. We set the height to 100% to match the height of navigation links. We add a bit of padding to create more space. Font size to 1 rm. Text decoration should be set to none to remove the default underline. Also, let's set the color of the text to something white. Display to flex and align items center. Additionally, we can disable user drag and user select by setting them to none. Now, the buttons inside our navigation bar don't display the interaction, but we can change that. Let's hop into the index.html file and add the class logo to our logo element. That will make styling a bit easier. So if everything is ready, let's define our hover effect. We will exclude our logo class since we don't want the hover effect on it. Now, let's pick a slightly darker background color, then the navigation bar. Set the custom text underline, pick the color, and define it as solid 2 pixels. Change text underline offset to 6 pixels. That will give text some space, and transform it vertically by 1 pixel. Now the hover appears only on navigation links, and the effect looks great, but it's too sharp. Let's add some transition to it. Inside the anchor tag styling, set transition to background color 0.2 second, and text decoration 0.1 second. With just one transition, it looks way better now during interaction. Let's make our logo a bit more prominent so it stands out. For the class logo, we'll increase the font size to 1.5 rem and set the font weight to bold. If you've made it this far, great job. Now, let's move on to creating our sidebar. To do this, we'll need to head back to the index file to make some more adjustments. Copy and paste our unordered list one more time and add the class sidebar to one of the copies. At the end of the normal navigation bar, let's make an additional anchor tag element that will be our button to open up the sidebar. Do the same thing inside the sidebar, but this time at the very beginning. Obviously, it will be the closing button. We can also remove our logo from the sidebar since we don't need it there. Now, the basic template of our navigation is almost ready, but we are still missing icons for menu buttons. To change that, let's go to the fonts.google.com/icons. Then pick the menu button from the list and download it as a SVG file. Do the same thing with the close icon. Make sure that the color of the icons match the color of the font in the navigation bar and size is set to 24 pixels. Let's head back to the HTML file, open the downloaded icons in the notepad, and paste them into the correct anchor tag. After all of these icons should be visible on the page. And finally, we can start tweaking our sidebar. First, let's set the position to fixed, top and right value to 0, so the sidebar will stay on top. Flex direction to column, height to 100 device viewport height, so it will match the parent, max width to 300 pixels, display to block, z-index to something big like 900, so sidebar will be always on top of the other elements. And lastly, change the background color to also something dark. We want to add a glass effect on our sidebar, but we can't do it just by putting their blur effect, because text will also become blurry. Instead, let's use before and create it differently. All we need to do is set the content to nothing, position to absolute, all the positions to 0 so it will fill the whole sidebar, background color to inherit, backdrop filter to blur with a value like 10 pixels, and z-index to -1 so it will be under our actual sidebar. Now the glass effect looks good on our sidebar, but let's set the width of an unordered list to 100% of available space. And for our anchor tags, we can add Justify Content Center to center them out. It's almost time to take care about our responsive design. But before that, let's style the last element of our sidebar, which is the close button. We can change the cursor to pointer and justify self to end. Congratulations if you managed to get there. Now it's time to finally make our page responsive. First, let's hop into the script file and create a toggle sidebar function. Now get the sidebar element using Query Selector and open Menu button. Then for those elements, let's use ClassList toggle to manage the state of the sidebar and button. When this function is executed, the class name active and hidden will be removed or added to selected elements depending on current state. Now, let's go to the index file and make some final adjustments. First, add class mobile to every navigation element because we want to make them hidden on smaller screens. Next, set the on-click event for our open menu button with previously created toggle sidebar function. Now, let's do the same thing for the close menu button. Now we are only missing some additional styling. Let's head back to the style.css file. We can set the sidebar right position to -100%, and because we want to animate it, let's set the transition to 0.6 seconds ease out. Now we can add the styling for our sidebar when it is active. So let's select the sidebar active and set its right position to 0. Let's see how our page looks in the browser right now. As you can see, the sidebar is intentionally hidden, and when we click the Open Menu button, the active class is added to the sidebar, causing it to animate in. The animation speed might seem too fast, but it depends on the screen width. The wider the screen, the faster the animation executes due to the increased distance. Make sure to adjust the values to suit your needs. There are still a few things we need to address, so let's go back to style.css. First, let's style the Open Menu button. We can set the cursor to pointer, default display to none, because we want to display it only on specific resolutions, and set transition to the same as our sidebar. Now, let's set the opacity of this button to 0 when it is in a hidden state. That way, when the sidebar is open, the button will disappear. The only thing left is to use media queries to hide navigation items on certain resolutions. That way, we will create separate views for mobile devices. Make sure to put your queries at the end of file because CSS is read from top to bottom, and the rule that is set last is the one that will be executed. Let's use a media screen and set the max width to proper value. For me, it will be 800 pixels, but you should customize it to your needs. Now, for items with class mobile, we want to set display to none, and for the open menu button display to flex. We can also use media query to hide the sidebar when navigation items will appear and the sidebar is opened. So let's choose this time min width to 801 pixels and set its display to none. And that's it. As you can see, we finally have a fully responsive navigation bar. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and see you on the next one.